Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves not nestled snug in our beds, but battling a medieval winter. Imagine the wind, a razor-edged slap across your face, stinging your cheeks crimson. The air bites deep into your lungs with every breath, a constant reminder that warmth is a fleeting luxury. Snow, not the fluffy, picturesque kind you see on greeting cards, but a wet, heavy sludge, soaks through your threadbare boots, promising frostbite before sunrise. The comfort of your rough-spun tunic does little to ward off the penetrating cold, and the gnawing emptiness in your stomach echoes the bleak landscape around you. You probably won't survive this unless, of course, you listen very carefully. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from and the time. It's always fascinating to see who's listening in, and when. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge onward, the weight of firewood digging into your shoulder, each step a small victory against the icy grip of the path. The village, a collection of mud-daubed huts huddled together for warmth, seems miles away. The setting sun paints the snowdrifts in hues of violet and gray, a cruel beauty that mocks your shivering frame. You quicken your pace, driven by the primal urge to reach the flickering light of your hearth before darkness consumes you completely. Reaching your home, you duck through the low doorway, the meager warmth of the fire a welcome embrace. Your family, faces pale and drawn, greets you with tired smiles. Food is scarce, the winter larder is dwindling faster than usual this year. You huddle close to the flames, sharing stories of the day's hardships, a fragile defense against the encroaching despair. Did you know that medieval winters were, on average, significantly colder than what we experience today? We're talking about the depths of what some historians call the Little Ice Age, a period of prolonged cooling that affected Europe for centuries. Think not just snow, but frozen rivers, shorter growing seasons, and widespread famine. And you thought a power outage was bad. Inside your tiny home, the simple act of survival consumes every moment. Food preservation becomes a daily battle against spoilage. Herbs are your medicine cabinet. The rhythm of your life is dictated by the rising and setting of the sun, as work is limited. One fringe theory suggests some medieval peasants believed that excessive consumption of certain foods, like leeks, could actually cause the cold weather. Talk about blaming the victim. Historians still argue whether the Little Ice Age was a localized phenomenon or a globally synchronized event, but its impact on European society is undeniable. It influenced everything from agricultural practices to social structures. It even played a role in the outbreak of plagues, as weakened populations became more susceptible to disease. The long winter nights are filled with the low hum of chores. You mend clothing, spin wool, and tell stories to keep the children occupied. The concept of free time is a foreign luxury. Every moment is dedicated to securing your family's survival. Bathing is a rare event, a brief and brutal affair that leaves you shivering for hours afterward. The stench of unwashed bodies hangs heavy in the air, a constant reminder of your shared circumstances. Speaking of shared circumstances, you may have heard about feudalism, the dominant social system of the Middle Ages. It created a strict hierarchy of power, with lords owning the land and peasants working it in exchange for protection. During the winter, this system could become even more oppressive. Lords would demand their dues, even when the harvest was poor, leaving peasants with little to nothing to survive on. Kind of like some landlords today if you ask me. A quirkier, less documented aspect of winter life was the prevalence of folk remedies and superstitions. People believed in the power of charms, spells, and potions to ward off illness and misfortune. Some even attributed the harsh weather to the wrath of God, seeking solace in prayer and religious rituals. One old wives' tale suggested that a particularly harsh winter meant a bountiful spring. Let's hope that works. You can hear the wind howling outside the walls, the only separation between you and the unforgiving cold. Fear is a constant companion, gnawing at your resolve. You wonder if you will make it through this winter, if you will see the green shoots of spring emerge from the frozen earth. But amidst the hardship, there is also a sense of community, a shared understanding of your collective struggle. You rely on each other for support, sharing what little you have and finding strength in your shared humanity. The fire crackles and pops, casting dancing shadows on the walls. You watch your children as they drift off to sleep, their faces peaceful and untroubled. You know that tomorrow will bring more hardship, more challenges, but for now, you allow yourself a moment of quiet gratitude. You are alive, you are together, and you have survived another day. As the night deepens and the cold intensifies, you clutch your blanket tighter, knowing that the dawn, however distant, will eventually arrive. One mainstream historical fact: winter also affected medieval warfare. Armies couldn't move as easily, sieges were often put on hold, and battles became less frequent. Think of it as a medieval snow day for armies, although the consequences were much, much graver than missing algebra. An interesting historical aside: there's evidence that people drank a lot more alcohol in the winter, not just for the cheer but also to stave off the cold. Think mulled wine and spiced ale, liquid blankets that probably just made people feel warmer. Historians still debate the extent to which climate change has affected our understanding of medieval history. Some argue that it's crucial to consider the impact of the Little Ice Age on everything from economics to politics, while others believe that social and political factors were more significant. As you eventually drift into a restless sleep, dreams offer a brief respite from the harsh realities of your waking life. You dream of sunshine and warmth, of fields bursting with life, and of a future where food is plentiful and hardship is a distant memory. But even in your dreams, the cold lingers, a subtle reminder of the long winter ahead. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's pull up a comfy chair, maybe grab a mug of something warm, because we are going to need it. We're diving headfirst into the Little Ice Age, a chilly chapter in human history where just existing felt like an extreme sport. You trudge through knee-deep snow. The wind whips at your face, stinging your cheeks until they're numb. The year? Let's say it's 1350, give or take. Pick any year, chances are, it's going to be brutally cold anyway. You pull your threadbare woolen cloak tighter, but it offers little comfort against the biting wind. You can feel the chill seeping into your bones, a deep, persistent ache that no amount of huddling by the meager fire in your drafty cottage seems to alleviate. Every breath you take plumes out in a frosty cloud, a constant reminder of the relentless cold that has gripped Europe for what feels like an eternity. You glance at your breath, and wonder if you might just turn into a statue right there on the spot. Imagine, if you will, the struggle of daily life intensified tenfold. Simple tasks, like fetching water from the well or tending to the few scraggly crops that haven't succumbed to the frost, become Herculean efforts. You can't even blame it on the gym. This is real-world brutal. Food is scarce. The growing season is shorter, and yields are smaller. What little grain you manage to harvest is often blighted by mildew and fungus, rendering it barely edible. Maybe you add in some sawdust to make it feel like there's more than there is. Resourceful, aren't you? You are not alone. This frigid period, spanning roughly from the 14th to the mid-19th centuries, profoundly impacted societies across the globe, particularly in Europe. You see, contrary to popular belief, the Little Ice Age wasn't a true ice age, like the ones that brought mammoths roaming across continents. It was more of a prolonged period of cooler temperatures, punctuated by particularly harsh winters and short, cool summers. The exact causes are complex and debated, but factors like decreased solar activity, increased volcanic eruptions spewing ash into the atmosphere, and changes in ocean currents all played a role. Speaking of volcanoes, here's a quirky tidbit. Some historians believe that the eruption of Mount Tambora in 1815, one of the largest volcanic eruptions in recorded history, played a significant role in exacerbating the effects of the Little Ice Age. The massive amount of ash and sulfur dioxide released into the atmosphere caused a volcanic winter the following year, 1816, which became known as the Year Without a Summer. Imagine, frost in July, crops failing across the northern hemisphere. You'd think the apocalypse was upon us, or at least that your travel agent deserved a stern talking to. But it wasn't just about the cold. The Little Ice Age brought with it a host of other problems, including increased frequency of extreme weather events like floods, droughts, and storms. Rivers froze, ports iced over, and transportation ground to a halt. Trade routes were disrupted, and communities were isolated. It was like nature decided to throw a massive, centuries-long tantrum, and you, my friend, were caught right in the middle. Historians still argue whether the Little Ice Age directly caused or merely exacerbated existing social and economic tensions. What is clear, however, is that it had a significant impact on people's lives. Famine became more common, leading to widespread malnutrition and disease. The Black Death, which ravaged Europe in the mid-14th century, was likely made even deadlier by the weakened immune systems of a population already struggling with food shortages. You watch your neighbors, gaunt and weary, as they trudge past your cottage, their faces etched with worry. You know that many of them are barely surviving, and you wonder if you'll be next. The desperation is palpable, and the sense of unease hangs heavy in the air, thicker than the wood smoke curling from your chimney. But at least you have a chimney. Some folks had to sleep in stables with the animals, just to keep warm. This period of climate stress brought about some strange coping mechanisms. For example, during particularly harsh winters, people in some regions turned to tree ring dating, also known as dendrochronology, to figure out when the hard times might end. By examining the width of tree rings, they could reconstruct past climate patterns and try to predict future weather. While not exactly a crystal ball, it was a primitive form of forecasting that offered a sliver of hope in a seemingly endless winter. You wonder if your local wise woman could do that. Or maybe it's just an old wives' tale. Who knows? And the Thames River in London? It froze regularly. So much so that Londoners held frost fairs on the frozen river. You could buy trinkets, watch puppet shows, or even roast an ox over an open fire on the ice. Talk about a unique experience. Imagine ice skating, eating questionable meat, and trying not to fall through the ice all in one afternoon. Honestly, what could go wrong? The Little Ice Age also affected art and culture. The harsh landscapes and the struggles of daily life found their way into paintings, literature, and music. Artists depicted frozen landscapes, snow-covered villages, and the somber faces of people battling the elements. Writers chronicled the hardships and anxieties of the time, while musicians composed mournful melodies that reflected the prevailing mood of despair. Think of those gloomy winter landscapes you see in museums, chances are, they were painted during this period. One mainstream historical fact to consider is how the Little Ice Age contributed to the decline of Norse settlements in Greenland. These settlements, established by Vikings in the 10th century, had thrived for several centuries. However, as the climate cooled, the growing season shortened, and the surrounding seas became choked with ice, making it increasingly difficult to sustain their way of life. By the 15th century, the Norse settlements in Greenland had been abandoned. It's a stark reminder of the power of climate change to reshape human societies. You stare into the fire, feeling a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, the worst is over. But deep down, you know that the Little Ice Age is far from done. The chill in the air is a constant reminder of the long, hard winter ahead. You wrap your cloak tighter and pray for warmer days, even as you brace yourself for whatever the future may hold. Some historians believe the prolonged cold also spurred innovation. With shorter growing seasons and less reliable harvests, people had to find new ways to survive. This led to improvements in agricultural techniques, like crop rotation and water management, as well as the development of new technologies, like the heavy plow. Necessity, as they say, is the mother of invention, and the Little Ice Age certainly provided plenty of necessity. And as any good innovator will tell you, that requires a lot of caffeine. But did you know that in some parts of Europe, the Little Ice Age led to increased witch hunts? As crops failed and livestock died, people looked for someone to blame. Often, they turned to scapegoating women accused of witchcraft, believing that these women were somehow responsible for the bad weather and misfortunes. It's a sad and disturbing example of how climate change can exacerbate social tensions and lead to persecution. Looking back, It's easy to see the Little Ice Age as a period of hardship and suffering. But it was also a time of resilience, adaptation, and innovation. People found ways to cope with the challenges they faced, developing new technologies, adapting their lifestyles, and finding strength in community. Even in the face of adversity, the human spirit persevered. It's a lesson that resonates even today, as we grapple with the challenges of climate change in our own time. You see, the Little Ice Age wasn't just a historical footnote. It's a reminder that climate change is a powerful force that can shape human societies in profound ways. And while we may not be facing the same kind of cold that our ancestors did, we are facing new challenges that require the same kind of resilience, adaptation, and innovation that they demonstrated centuries ago. So, as you pull that blanket up and close your eyes, remember the Little Ice Age. Remember the struggles, the hardships, and the triumphs of those who lived through it. And remember that even in the darkest of times, hope remains, flickering like a candle in the winter wind. You can almost hear the ice cracking on the river outside. The wind howls. Sleep tight. You trudge wearily along the muddy path, the persistent drizzle plastering your tunic to your skin. The wind, a constant companion in this medieval world, whips around you, carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. Ahead, nestled amongst the fields like forgotten mushrooms, are the peasant dwellings. Home, sweet, drafty home. Let's be honest, these aren't exactly dream houses featured in Architectural Digest. Forget open floor plans and granite countertops. We're talking about simple, functional structures built from the most readily available materials, wattle and daub. Think of it as the medieval version of DIY, except instead of a trip to Home Depot, you're digging in the dirt. Wattle and daub, in case you're wondering, is essentially a woven lattice of sticks, plastered with a mixture of clay, straw, and often, animal dung. Yes, you heard that right. Poop. It's surprisingly effective, providing insulation and binding the structure together. Just try not to think about it too much when you're trying to get to sleep after a long day in the fields. It's all organic, all natural, right? The roof is usually thatched, a thick layer of straw or reeds piled atop a framework of branches. Thatch is actually quite good at insulating, keeping the house relatively warm in winter and cool in summer. Relatively is the key word here. We're not talking modern climate control. More like, less likely to freeze to death, or spontaneously combust. Think of it as SPF 5 for your house. Inside, things are minimalist. Space is limited, often just a single room shared by the entire family, and maybe a few farm animals for good measure. Privacy is a luxury you simply can't afford. Furniture is sparse, a rough-hewn table, a few stools, and maybe a chest for storing clothes and precious belongings. Your bed is likely a straw-filled mattress on the floor, shared with your siblings, and possibly the family dog. Snuggle in. The floor is usually just packed earth, which, unsurprisingly, is not the easiest thing to keep clean. Dirt, mud, and the occasional dropped scrap of food are par for the course. Hygiene, as you might imagine, wasn't exactly a top priority. But hey, at least you're building up your immune system. Early exposure, right? Light is scarce. Windows, if they exist at all, are small and covered with oiled cloth or shutters. This keeps out the wind and rain, but also most of the sunlight. So, you're mostly living in semi-darkness. Perfect for contemplating the meaning of life, or, more likely, just trying to find your socks. Heating is provided by a central hearth, a simple fire pit in the middle of the room. This is the heart of the home, providing warmth, light, and a place to cook. But it also fills the room with smoke, which can be irritating to the eyes and lungs. Ever tried making dinner in a thick fog? It's like that, but every single day. Now, mainstream historical fact time. Did you know that the size of a peasant dwelling was often limited by the lord of the manor? He wanted to ensure that peasants didn't get too comfortable, or too ambitious. A bigger house might give them ideas above their station. Can't be having that, can we? And here's a quirky tidbit: some historians believe that the practice of thatching roofs may have inadvertently led to the spread of certain diseases, as rodents and insects found cozy homes in the straw. So, your roof wasn't just keeping out the rain, it was also a potential breeding ground for fleas carrying the plague. Sweet dreams. Historians still argue whether the living conditions of peasants were universally miserable. Some point to the archaeological evidence of surprisingly well-made pottery and tools, suggesting a degree of comfort and even artistry. Others emphasize the high mortality rates, the constant threat of famine and disease, and the backbreaking labor that characterized peasant life. It's a complex picture, a blend of hardship and resilience. The location of these dwellings was also carefully considered. They were usually situated close to the fields, to minimize travel time and maximize working hours. Proximity to a water source was also crucial, for drinking, cooking, and washing. Although, let's be honest, washing wasn't exactly an everyday occurrence. Building materials weren't always consistent across the land. Depending on the region, you might find dwellings built from stone, timber, or even turf. In forested areas, timber was plentiful, leading to the construction of sturdy wooden houses. In areas with abundant stone, you might see more durable, albeit colder, stone structures. Think of it as regional variations in medieval home design. But no matter the materials, the basic design remained the same: simple, functional, and built to withstand the elements. These houses were not meant to be luxurious. They were meant to provide shelter, a place to eat, sleep, and raise a family. They were a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of the peasant population. Let's talk a bit about food storage. Without refrigeration, keeping food fresh was a constant challenge. Root cellars were common, underground spaces where vegetables and fruits could be stored for longer periods. Salting and smoking were also used to preserve meat and fish. And, of course, the ever-reliable method of eat it before it goes bad. Efficiency is key. And remember, you're not just sharing your living space with your family and the occasional farm animal. You're also sharing it with a variety of insects, rodents, and other unwanted guests. Fleas, lice, rats, mice, they were all part of the medieval household experience. Consider them your uninvited roommates. Another quirky fact: some peasant dwellings had small squints or peepholes built into the walls. These allowed the inhabitants to keep an eye on what was happening outside, providing a measure of security against thieves or other threats. Think of it as the medieval version of a doorbell camera. Historians still argue about the extent to which peasants owned their own homes. While some were undoubtedly tenants, renting their land and dwellings from the lord of the manor, others may have had more secure tenure, allowing them to pass their property on to their children. The details varied from place to place, and from time to time. You might be wondering about the decorations. Well, let's just say that interior design wasn't exactly a thriving industry in the Middle Ages. Walls were often left bare, or perhaps whitewashed with lime. Simple tapestries or religious icons might adorn the space, adding a touch of color and personality. A splash of medieval flair, if you will. Life in a peasant dwelling was undoubtedly hard. But it was also a life filled with community, resilience, and a deep connection to the land. These homes weren't just shelters. They were the center of family life, the place where stories were told, meals were shared, and memories were made. And hey, on the bright side, at least you didn't have to worry about paying property taxes. Back then, you paid with your labor. Sure, 6 days a week working in the fields isn't ideal, but think of all that money you are saving. Speaking of taxes, did you know the phrase, rubbing salt in the wound, comes from the practice of taxing salt? If you were already struggling, this just made things worse. Now, as the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the fields, you make your way back to your humble abode. The thought of a warm fire and a simple meal provides a small measure of comfort. It may not be much, but it's home. And, after all, there's no place like it, especially when the wind is howling and the rain is pouring down. You trudge through the snow, the wind biting at any exposed skin, and honestly, you're starting to think that a nice, warm fire sounds less like a luxury and more like a necessity for survival. You can almost smell the crackling wood, feel the heat radiating outwards, and hear the gentle popping as the flames dance. Toasty. But before you get too lost in your fireside fantasy, let's talk about the reality of staying warm in a pre-industrial world. Forget flicking a switch or adjusting a thermostat. Back then, warmth often depended on something far more fundamental: firewood. And let me tell you, firewood was a precious commodity. Seriously, imagine trying to heat your entire house, cook all your meals, and maybe even power some rudimentary industries with nothing but chopped trees. Sounds exhausting, right? You see, it wasn't just a matter of grabbing any old branch lying on the forest floor. The best firewood came from dense hardwoods like oak, beech, and ash. These woods burned hotter and longer than softwoods like pine or fir. They provided more heat for the effort of chopping, splitting, and hauling them back to your home. Think of it like this: you wouldn't want to try powering a spaceship with twigs and leaves, would you? You need the good stuff for maximum efficiency. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so just go into the forest and chop down a tree. Problem solved. But it wasn't that simple. Forests were often carefully managed, and access to them wasn't always guaranteed. In many parts of Europe, woodlands were owned by nobles or the church, and commoners might only have limited rights to collect firewood. Trespassing could lead to fines, beatings, or even worse. And honestly, even if you did have permission, imagine how much work it was. You'd need an axe, a saw, if you were lucky, and a whole lot of elbow grease. Then, you'd have to haul the wood back home, piece by piece, maybe with the help of an animal if you were fortunate. It's no wonder so many people spent their winters shivering. By the way, did you know that people used to steal firewood? Shocking, I know. But when your family's survival depends on staying warm, a little light larceny doesn't seem so bad, huh? It was a constant cat-and-mouse game between those who had firewood and those who desperately needed it. Some sources say that one of the most common crimes in medieval England was, you guessed it, theft of firewood. Talk about a high-stakes game of hide-and-seek. Speaking of England, they really felt the pinch when it came to firewood. You might not realize it, but by the 16th and 17th centuries, much of England's original forests had been cleared for agriculture, shipbuilding, and, of course, heating. This led to a serious firewood shortage, especially in urban areas like London. People were getting desperate, and the price of firewood skyrocketed. They even started burning things like peat, decayed vegetation, and coal, which, let's be honest, weren't exactly known for their delightful aroma. Can you imagine the air quality? Yikes! And while we're on the topic of questionable fuel sources, did you know that in some parts of Europe, people burned animal dung as fuel? Yeah, I know, gross. But desperate times call for desperate measures, right? Dried animal dung burned surprisingly well, and it was readily available in agricultural areas. Plus, it probably didn't smell any worse than the unwashed masses, to be fair. Historians still argue whether deforestation caused by firewood consumption significantly contributed to climate change in pre-industrial times. While the impact was certainly less than what we're seeing today with fossil fuels, some researchers believe that widespread deforestation could have led to regional climate changes and soil erosion. Others argue that the impact was more localized and that natural climate variations played a more significant role. Of course, not everyone was freezing their buns off. If you were wealthy, you could afford to keep your home nice and toasty all winter long. You'd have servants to chop and haul wood, and you could afford to buy the best quality firewood. Plus, you probably had better insulated homes and maybe even a fireplace in every room. For the wealthy, the firewood crisis was less about survival and more about maintaining a certain level of comfort and luxury. They were probably stressed about other things, like what jewels to wear to the next ball. You know, real problems. And it's not just about staying warm. Firewood was also essential for cooking. Think about it, No microwave, no oven, no gas stove. Everything was cooked over an open fire or in a hearth. From roasting meat to baking bread, firewood was the fuel that sustained life. In fact, the hearth was often the center of the home, both literally and figuratively. It was where families gathered to eat, socialize, and tell stories. It was a source of warmth, light, and nourishment. The hearth was so important that it often had religious or symbolic significance. In some cultures, the hearth was seen as a sacred space, and the fire was believed to have protective powers. Don't forget the expression hearth and home, which still resonates with us today. It's also worth noting that the type of firewood used could vary depending on the region and the available resources. In coastal areas, driftwood was often a valuable source of fuel. In mountainous regions, people might use pine or fir, even if it wasn't the ideal choice. The key was to make the most of what you had. People were generally resourceful, even with stuff we might consider primitive now. So, as you sit here, contemplating the importance of firewood, you can appreciate just how much our modern lives have changed. We take warmth for granted, but for our ancestors, it was a constant struggle. They had to work hard, plan ahead, and conserve resources just to survive the winter. Next time you crank up the heat, take a moment to think about the folks who relied on nothing but a pile of firewood to keep warm. And as a bonus fun fact, back in the day, measuring firewood was a big deal. They had all sorts of complicated systems for measuring cords, stacks, and piles of wood. It was so important that there were even laws and regulations about how firewood should be measured and sold. So, if you ever find yourself transported back in time, be sure to brush up on your firewood measurement skills. It might just save you from getting cheated by a shady wood merchant. Now, if you'll excuse me, all this talk about firewood has made me sleepy. I think I'll go find a nice, warm spot by the radiator. Well, you get the idea. Good night, sweet dreams of crackling fires and toasty toes. Or, whatever keeps you warm. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's talk about food. Specifically, the lack thereof. You ever get that pang of anxiety when you look in the fridge and there's only, half a jar of pickles and a suspiciously old lemon? Now, imagine that feeling, but amplified by, winter. And the fact that your family is entirely dependent on you to not let them starve. No pressure, right? You trudge back to your rudimentary cabin, the wind whipping at your face. The sun, a pale and distant memory, has already dipped below the horizon. Every crunch of snow under your worn leather boots is a stark reminder of the months of hardship looming ahead. You see, you've had a decent harvest, but decent doesn't exactly scream abundance when you're facing a long, harsh winter. It screams, more like, okay, how do we stretch this out so we're not gnawing on tree bark by February? So, preservation. It's not just a hobby for quirky homesteaders on YouTube. It's survival. And for millennia, people just like you, albeit perhaps a bit tougher, and probably smelling worse, have wrestled with the same fundamental problem: how do you keep your food from going bad? Salting, of course, is a big one. You likely have some experience with this from your own kitchen. Maybe you cure your own bacon. If not, you should. It's therapeutic. Salting works by drawing out moisture, which is the lifeblood of bacteria. No water, no party for the microbes. Think of it like a really aggressive eviction notice on a microscopic scale. Ham, beef, even fish can be packed in salt. Some early Roman recipes called for burying salted pork in the ground to keep it cool. Talk about farm to table, huh? And speaking of the Romans, mainstream historical fact, they were masters of food preservation. They even had heated greenhouses to grow food out of season, a pretty impressive feat for the time. Historians still argue whether the common Roman citizen benefited from these innovations, or if they were largely reserved for the wealthy elite. You probably had to be pretty chummy with Caesar to get some fresh asparagus in December. Quirky tidbit time: did you know that Vikings used to preserve fish by drying it outdoors in the Arctic air? Then, before eating it, they'd tenderize it by beating it with mallets. Imagine the dinner conversation: "Honey, can you pass the dried cod and the mallet?" Yum. Then there's smoking. Picture it: you carefully suspend strips of meat or fish in a smokehouse, the fragrant smoke from burning wood curling around them, slowly imparting both flavor and preservation. The smoke contains compounds that kill bacteria and help to dry out the food. Plus, it adds a smoky flavor that you'll find to be surprisingly appealing, especially when you're eating it for the 10th straight day. Drying, similar to salting, is all about removing moisture. Fruits, vegetables, even meat can be dried. Think jerky. Or dried apples, which you can later rehydrate into a surprisingly palatable compote. Sun-drying is the most basic method. Just lay your food out in the sun and let nature do its thing. Of course, you have to worry about bugs and birds, so a little bit of netting comes in handy. Now, let's talk about fermentation. This is where things get a little funky, literally. Fermentation involves using beneficial bacteria or yeast to transform food and inhibit the growth of harmful microorganisms. Sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurt, cheese, even beer and wine, all are products of fermentation. It's basically tricking the bad microbes into thinking the good microbes are throwing a way cooler party and they don't even want to be there. You could even try your hand at making mead. You'll need honey, water, and a lot of patience. And maybe a strong liver. Quirky fact: some cultures used to bury their fermented foods underground in pits lined with clay or straw. It's like a prehistoric refrigerator. So if your spouse asks why you're digging up the yard, just tell them it's for science. Mainstream historical fact: fermentation has been used for thousands of years. Archaeologists have found evidence of fermented beverages dating back to the Neolithic period. I'm not saying cavemen were fermenting IPAs, but, they were onto something. Historians still argue exactly when and where specific fermentation techniques originated, but one thing is clear: people have been boozing it up for a very, very long time. Let's not forget pickling. This involves immersing food in a brine or vinegar solution, which inhibits bacterial growth. Cucumbers, onions, beets, peppers, pretty much anything can be pickled. The sharpness of the vinegar can be a welcome change from the monotony of salted meats and dried vegetables. A good pickle is a simple pleasure that you won't want to underestimate. And hey, a pickle can even be a crunchy, flavorful distraction from the nagging anxieties in the back of your mind, or something. The main thing to keep in mind with all of these preservation techniques is cleanliness. Sterilize your jars, wash your hands, and keep your work surfaces clean. Otherwise, you'll be trading starvation for botulism, which isn't exactly an upgrade. Quirky tidbit: people used to believe that the phases of the moon affected food preservation. Some believed that pickling was best done during a full moon. Honestly, if gazing at the moon while you pickle gives you a little extra hope, why not? Mainstream historical fact: in the pre-industrial era, food preservation was a crucial skill for ensuring survival, especially in colder climates. Families would spend weeks, even months, preparing food for the winter. It was a communal effort, with everyone pitching in. It wasn't exactly a party, but it was a necessary ritual. Historians still debate the degree to which access to preserved foods determined social status and power in these societies. But I'm willing to bet the dude with the most sauerkraut got to call the shots. And there you have it. A few of the ways you might keep yourself and your loved ones alive through the winter. It's hard work, sure, but it's also incredibly rewarding. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing that you've taken control of your own survival, that you've provided for your family, that you've conquered, at least for a little while, the relentless threat of starvation. Plus, think of all the cool party tricks. Oh, you like my homemade sauerkraut? I buried it in the backyard, just like my ancestors. Now, go forth, preserve your food, and maybe, just maybe, get a little sleep. You earned it. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's talk about animals, but not just in that, puppy kind of way. We're diving deep into how absolutely crucial these furry, feathery, and sometimes scaly pals were, and still are, to human survival. So, grab a comfy blanket, maybe a warm drink, and let's get cozy with the realities of livestock, past and present. You trudge through the mud, the chill seeping into your boots. The sun, a pale disk behind the clouds, barely offers any warmth. You're tired. Really tired. And hungry. Your survival depends on a lot of things, but right now, you need food. And shelter. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of hope. Now, imagine that scenario playing out for, I don't know, pretty much all of human history. Before supermarkets and grocery delivery apps, imagine, your connection to animals wasn't just about a cute pet. It was about life. Or, more accurately, avoiding death. You see that cow over there, placidly chewing its cud? It's not just potential steak, it's your refrigerator, your dairy, your transportation, and sometimes, believe it or not, your status symbol. That's a whole lot of responsibility for one bovine, isn't it? The obvious benefit, of course, is food. Milk, cheese, butter, meat, these were staples for countless cultures. Think of the Vikings, whose longboats were stocked with salted meat and dried fish, fueling their voyages across the stormy seas. Or consider the nomadic tribes of Central Asia, whose diets consisted largely of milk and meat from their herds of horses, sheep, and goats. They were basically running on animal power, in more ways than one. I mean, seriously, who needs a protein bar when you've got a whole sheep walking around? But it goes way beyond just putting food on the table. Think about clothing. Wool from sheep, hides from cattle, even the delicate silk spun by silkworms, these provided protection from the elements. And let's be honest, you wouldn't want to face a blizzard in a linen tunic, would you? Unless you really like the feeling of hypothermia. Ever wonder why the Inuit developed such elaborate and warm clothing? Yup, animal hides, primarily from seals, caribou, and bears, were crucial for survival in the harsh Arctic environment. They basically invented the original Gore-Tex, centuries before it became a fancy outdoor brand. Bet they didn't see that coming. And then there's transportation. Horses, donkeys, camels, oxen, these beasts of burden allowed humans to travel further, carry heavier loads, and cultivate larger areas of land. Think of the Roman Empire, built on the back of its well-organized system of roads and its reliance on horses for transportation and communication. Or the Silk Road, a network of trade routes that stretched across Asia, facilitated by caravans of camels laden with goods. Imagine trying to build the pyramids without oxen to haul those massive stones. Actually, don't. It's too depressing. These animals were also vital in agriculture. Oxen pulled plows, preparing the soil for planting. Their manure fertilized the fields, enriching the soil and increasing crop yields. They were, in essence, living, breathing, pooping tractors. Talk about multitasking. You're getting your organic fertilizer and your labor force all in one handy package. And here's a slightly less glamorous, but equally important role, animals as sources of fuel. Dried dung, particularly from cattle and camels, has been used for centuries as a fuel source in regions where wood is scarce. It might not be the most fragrant way to heat your home, but hey, when you're freezing your tail off, you're not exactly picky, are you? Now, let's dive into some lesser-known facts. Did you know that pigeons were used extensively during both World Wars to carry messages across enemy lines? These feathered spies, often equipped with tiny cameras, played a crucial role in gathering intelligence. They were like the original drones, only with more personality. And significantly more bird poop. Or how about the fact that some cultures used animal bladders as containers for liquids? Yup, before plastic bottles, you might have been drinking your water out of a goat bladder. Cheers! I mean, it's resourceful, sure, but I think I'll stick with my reusable water bottle, thanks. Here's a thought that might make you chuckle, or maybe shudder. In medieval Europe, pigs were sometimes put on trial for crimes. Yes, you read that right. A pig accused of attacking a child might be brought before a court, judged, and even sentenced to death. Talk about a kangaroo court. I guess bacon bits took on a whole new meaning back then. But the story of animals and human survival isn't just a historical one. It's a story that continues to unfold today. Think about the use of working dogs in law enforcement and search and rescue operations. Or the therapeutic benefits of interacting with animals, from therapy dogs in hospitals to equine-assisted therapy for people with disabilities. Animals continue to provide us with companionship, support, and even healing. Of course, our relationship with animals is not without its complexities and contradictions. The ethics of animal agriculture, the impact of livestock farming on the environment, and the treatment of animals in research are all issues that continue to spark debate and controversy. I mean, have you seen some of the documentaries about factory farming? It's enough to make you seriously reconsider your burger habit. Historians still argue whether the domestication of animals was a deliberate act or a gradual process of coevolution. Did humans actively seek out and tame wild animals, or did animals adapt to living alongside humans, gradually becoming domesticated over time? It's a classic chicken or the egg conundrum, only with more hooves. And then there's the question of how our perceptions of animals have changed over time. In some cultures, animals are revered as sacred beings, while in others, they are viewed primarily as commodities. These differing perspectives reflect not only cultural values but also practical considerations. When your survival depends on the milk from your cow, you might have a slightly different view of that cow than someone who sees it as just another item on the menu. So, as you curl up a little tighter, remember that your life, your comfort, even your ability to read these words, is intimately connected to the animals who have shared this planet with us. They're not just cute faces or tasty meals, they're an integral part of our history, our culture, and our very survival. From the wool sweater you're wearing to the leather shoes on your feet, animals have played a role in shaping your world. And that, my friend, is something worth contemplating. Now, how about a nice, warm glass of almond milk? I'm feeling a bit sensitive tonight. And maybe we can delve deeper into the curious case of domesticated llamas next time. Sleep tight, or, just keep on scrolling. The world's your oyster, as they say. Wait, oysters are animals. Never mind. Good night. Alright, settle in. Let's get cozy, because we're diving deep into your closet. Or, rather, the idea of your closet, reimagined as a fortress against the encroaching chill. You trudge through the biting wind, face stinging, wondering why you thought a summer dress and flip-flops were appropriate attire for whatever it is you're doing out in this weather. Don't worry, we've all been there. The secret, my friend, is layers. Think of yourself as an onion, but a fashionable, thermally regulated onion. You begin with your base layer, clinging to your skin like a long-lost lover. This is your moisture-wicking champion. You might opt for merino wool, that magical substance that somehow keeps you warm even when wet, and doesn't smell like a locker room after a single wear. Or, perhaps you're more of a synthetic devotee, embracing the quick-drying power of polyester or nylon. The key is to avoid cotton. Cotton, bless its absorbent little heart, is your enemy in the cold. Once it gets wet, it becomes a frigid, clinging shroud. It's like wearing a damp dish rag all day. No thank you. Now, onto the mid-layer. This is where the real warmth comes into play. You might pull on a fleece jacket, soft and cuddly, a veritable hug for your torso. Or perhaps a down vest, puffing you up into a Michelin Man of insulation. Historically, layers have been crucial for survival in cold climates. The Inuit, for example, perfected the art of layering with animal skins, creating waterproof and windproof protection that allowed them to thrive in the Arctic. They understood the principles of trapping air between layers long before we had fancy synthetic fabrics. They were essentially the OG layering experts. Did you know, speaking of animal skins, that Vikings also famously used layers of wool and furs to stay warm? They even reportedly wore special underwear made of animal hair, which sounds scratchy. Very, very scratchy. You can almost feel it, right? Now, historians still argue whether the sagas accurately portray Viking clothing, but the archaeological evidence does suggest a sophisticated understanding of textiles and insulation. They weren't just pillaging, they were pillaging in style, and with a reasonable chance of not freezing to death. Now you're reaching for your outer layer. This is your shield against the elements, your impenetrable fortress. A waterproof and windproof jacket is your best friend here. Something that can repel rain, snow, and that soul-crushing wind that seems to cut right through you. Think Gore-Tex, or a similar breathable membrane. You want something that will keep the elements out while allowing moisture to escape from your inner layers. Because trust me, even in the dead of winter, you can sweat. And, oh my goodness, the hoods. Never underestimate the power of a good hood. It's like a personal little cave for your head. A sanctuary from the storm. Some jackets even have detachable hoods, giving you options for different weather conditions. It's like having a convertible for your head. How luxurious. Let's talk fabrics for a second. Wool, as we mentioned, is a natural insulator, trapping air between its fibers. It's also naturally water repellent, thanks to the lanolin in the wool. Down, the fluffy undercoat of ducks and geese, is incredibly lightweight and warm. It's like wearing a cloud, a very warm cloud. But down does lose its insulating properties when wet, so it's important to keep it dry. Synthetics like polyester and nylon are durable, quick-drying, and often less expensive than natural fibers. They're also easier to care for, which is a definite bonus. Because who has time to hand-wash everything? Not you, that's for sure. And don't forget your extremities. Your hands, feet, and head are particularly vulnerable to the cold. A warm hat is essential, because you lose a significant amount of heat through your head. Or at least, that's what your mom always told you. Some scientists dispute the whole "most heat escapes through the head" thing, arguing that it's more about the proportion of exposed surface area. But either way, a hat is a good idea. Gloves or mittens are also crucial. Mittens are generally warmer than gloves, because they allow your fingers to share heat. But gloves offer more dexterity. So it's a trade-off. Do you want warm hands, or the ability to text your friends? A difficult choice indeed. And socks. Oh, the humble sock. But don't underestimate its importance. Wool socks are a great choice, or synthetic socks designed for cold weather. Avoid cotton socks, for the same reason you avoid cotton base layers, they get wet and stay wet. Boots are another essential piece of the puzzle. You need something that's waterproof, insulated, and has good traction. Slipping and falling on ice is not only embarrassing, but also potentially dangerous. Trust me, the ER is not the place you want to spend your winter vacation. So invest in some good boots. Your ankles will thank you. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but what about style? Don't worry, you can still look fashionable while staying warm. Layering is an art, not a science. Experiment with different colors and textures to create a look that's both functional and stylish. A pop of color from a scarf or hat can add some personality to your outfit. Or try layering different lengths of jackets to create a more interesting silhouette. Historically, the pursuit of fashion and warmth hasn't always been a harmonious relationship. Think about the elaborate, but often impractical, clothing of the 18th century. Wigs, corsets, and voluminous skirts may have looked impressive, but they offered little protection from the cold. They were basically walking wind tunnels. Of course, warmth was often a luxury reserved for the wealthy. The poor had to make do with whatever they could find, often relying on layers of rags and hand-me-downs. Speaking of the poor, did you know that in medieval times, some people actually slept standing up to stay warm? They would huddle together in barns or stables, relying on the body heat of animals to keep them alive. Now that's dedication to staying warm. Though, admittedly, not the most comfortable sleeping arrangement. Imagine waking up with a cow staring at you. Historians still argue whether the clothing of the past was primarily driven by practicality or by social status and fashion. But it's likely a combination of both. People have always sought to express themselves through their clothing, even in the most challenging environments. So don't be afraid to get creative with your layers. And, really, that's the key: creativity and adaptability. The weather is unpredictable, and your clothing needs to be able to adapt to changing conditions. Layering allows you to add or remove layers as needed, keeping you comfortable in a wide range of temperatures. You might also consider investing in some accessories, like a neck gaiter or a face mask. These can provide extra protection for your face and neck in extreme cold. They're also great for hiding from people you don't want to talk to. A strategically placed face mask can be a social lifesaver. And finally, remember that comfort is key. If you're not comfortable in your clothing, you're not going to enjoy being outside. So choose fabrics and styles that feel good against your skin and allow you to move freely. You want to be able to enjoy the winter landscape, not be distracted by itchy wool or restrictive layers. Dress like you're about to go on a polar expedition, even if the destination is just your local coffee shop. You can even get heated socks. Seriously, technology has come so far. Heated socks. Imagine the possibilities. You'll trudge through the snow like a blissful, warm-footed yeti. And people will look at you and wonder, just how do they do it? Okay, settle in, pull up a blanket, maybe grab a mug of something warm. Let's talk about winter. Specifically, how people, your ancestors, if you really think about it, survived it way back when. Think pre-central heating, pre-Netflix, pre-Amazon Prime, the horror. Imagine this: you trudge through knee-deep snow, the wind biting at any exposed skin. Your breath plumes out in front of you, a fleeting cloud against the gray sky. The sun, a distant memory, barely crests the horizon before dipping back down, leaving you in perpetual twilight. Winter. It wasn't just a season, it was a test. A test of resilience, of community, and of just how much reindeer jerky you could stomach. Survival wasn't a solo act. While modern-day survivalists preach self-reliance, our forebears understood a fundamental truth: winter was a team sport. Villages weren't just collections of houses, they were interconnected webs of mutual support. Think of it like a medieval co-op, but with more wood chopping and fewer organic kale smoothies. You depended on your neighbors, and they depended on you. And heaven help you if you were the village slacker. Oh, you ran out of firewood in January? That's unfortunate. Food was, unsurprisingly, a major concern. You'd spent the warmer months preserving everything you could get your hands on, drying meat, salting fish, pickling vegetables, fermenting anything that looked remotely edible. The goal was to create a pantry that could rival a squirrel's, only slightly less buried. Every scrap was precious, every technique vital. Think of it as the original zero-waste lifestyle, only motivated by sheer desperation rather than a desire to save the planet, though, let's be honest, it did save the planet, relatively speaking. One common practice was communal baking. Imagine a giant oven, big enough to bake dozens of loaves at once. Families would pool their grain and resources, taking turns to fire up the oven and produce enough bread to last them for weeks. It wasn't just about efficiency, it was about sharing the burden and ensuring everyone had enough to eat. Plus, I bet that communal baking day was the social event of the season. Can you imagine the gossip? Did you hear Agnes put what in her bread dough? Honestly. Historians still argue whether this was a conscious effort towards social cohesion or simply a practical solution to limited resources. What do you think? And speaking of resources, consider the communal barns. Animals were valuable. In the winter, when grazing was impossible, keeping them alive was a challenge. So, many villages built large, shared barns where animals could be sheltered and fed. This not only conserved resources but also provided a central location for tending to the animals, which, let's be honest, was probably warmer and a lot less lonely than freezing your buns off in your own personal barn. But community wasn't just about sharing resources, it was also about sharing labor. Tasks like chopping wood, repairing roofs, and clearing snow were often done collectively. Think of it as a medieval barn raising, but instead of building a barn, you were just trying to survive until spring. You wouldn't want to be that family whose roof collapsed under the weight of the snow, now would you? The talk of the town. Remember, your life back then was largely dictated by the seasons. Winter brought with it not only hardship but also a period of relative rest. With farming impossible, the pace of life slowed. People spent more time indoors, gathered around the fire, telling stories, crafting, and, well, probably drinking. Lots and lots of drinking. Mead, ale, cider, whatever could be fermented, was. It was nature's way of saying, okay, you've worked hard all year. Now sit down, relax, and try not to freeze to death. One quirky winter tradition you might find interesting: in some cultures, the winter solstice was seen as a time when the veil between worlds was thin. People believed that spirits could more easily cross over, so they would perform rituals to appease them or ward them off. Think of it as a medieval Halloween, but with less candy and more chanting. Not sure I'd enjoy going door to door for that kind of treat. Trick or treat. I give you a prayer to ward off the evil spirits. And, of course, let's not forget the importance of storytelling. Before the internet, before television, before even the printing press, stories were the primary means of entertainment and education. Winter evenings were filled with tales of heroes and villains, of gods and monsters, of cautionary fables designed to keep you from wandering into the woods alone after dark. Imagine being huddled around a crackling fire, listening to a master storyteller weave a captivating narrative. It's a connection to the past that few of us experience today. We know that during the medieval period, many people struggled with mental health issues. Can you imagine the winter blues, without the ability to binge-watch your favorite show or call a friend? Well, that is where the village comes into play. While those dealing with such issues were not always treated with the sensitivity and understanding we have today, the importance of social connection and community cannot be overstated. It was through these bonds that people found solace, support, and a sense of belonging. It is a wonder what traditions might have been lost due to societal and climate changes. For example, did you know that the winter solstice in some pre-Christian cultures was celebrated with a ritualistic bath in freezing water? Yeah. Supposedly, it cleansed the body and spirit, preparing you for the new year. I don't know about you, but I think I'd prefer a hot bath and a cup of tea. Then again, those people were a lot tougher than I am. There were certainly unique roles and responsibilities within the community, as well. For instance, the village elder held a revered position, their wisdom and experience serving as a guiding light during the long, dark months. And while most people focus on staying alive, some were responsible for maintaining community knowledge and recording histories. Now that's a tough job. Now, it's easy to romanticize the past. To imagine these close-knit communities as idyllic havens of cooperation and harmony. But let's be real, there were undoubtedly conflicts, tensions, and disagreements. People are people, after all, regardless of the century they live in. I mean, could you imagine spending months on end with the same small group of people, with limited resources and endless darkness? I bet passive-aggressive behavior was a huge problem. Oh, that's how you chop wood, huh, Agnes? Interesting technique. And finally, let's talk about the role of religion. For many people, winter was a time of spiritual reflection and renewal. Festivals and rituals were held to mark the changing seasons and to seek the blessings of the gods. These celebrations provided a sense of hope and purpose during a time of hardship and uncertainty. A time when the world felt like it was dying only to be reborn again. As the days lengthen and the sun begins to warm the earth, you start to see a glimmer of hope. The end of winter is not guaranteed, but it is inevitable. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of community. The communities that not only survived but thrived throughout the years. So next time you're snuggled up in your warm home, sipping hot cocoa and watching the snow fall outside, take a moment to appreciate the sacrifices and struggles of those who came before you. It might just make that cozy blanket feel a little bit warmer. You trudge. Yup, that's about the long and short of it. Another day dawns, if you can even call it that, and the sun is playing hide-and-seek behind a thick blanket of gray that seems permanently glued to the sky. It's the kind of day that makes you want to curl up with a warm blanket and a good book, or, let's be honest, binge-watch some terrible reality TV. But alas, the crops won't tend themselves, will they? And the livestock certainly won't magically produce more milk just because you're feeling a bit gloomy. The fields are, well, let's just say they've seen better days. Remember that vibrant green you were so proud of back in the summer? Yeah, that's long gone. Now, it's mostly shades of brown and withered yellow, punctuated by the occasional stubbornly green stalk that refuses to admit defeat. The limited daylight hours are a real bummer, because even when the sun does peek out, it feels like it's clocking out early for the day. Photosynthesis is struggling, and you can practically hear the plants sighing in resignation. You're not alone in feeling the pinch. Everyone's feeling it. You see it in their faces as they pass in the muddy lane, a weariness that seeps deeper than the chill in the air. Even the village gossip seems a bit subdued, perhaps they're saving their energy for more important matters, like figuring out how to stretch the dwindling supplies. You pick up your tools with a sigh that rivals the wind whistling through the barren branches of the trees. It's time to get to work, even if the motivation is lacking. You focus on the task at hand, weeding the stubborn patches that are still clinging to life. It's a slow, monotonous process, but there's a certain satisfaction in clearing away the dead and preparing the ground for the next planting season. Hope springs eternal, even in the dead of winter, or late fall, whatever this gray purgatory counts as. Mainstream historical fact: farmers in medieval Europe often relied on crop rotation to maintain soil fertility, a practice that helped prevent exhaustion of the land even with limited fertilizer options. This included leaving fields fallow, which meant letting them rest for a season. Kinda like taking a nap for your farm, I guess. Quirky tidbit: there's evidence suggesting some medieval communities used to judge the quality of their soil by eating it. Yup, you read that right. Apparently, different types of soil had distinct tastes and textures, and experienced farmers could tell a lot about its nutrient content just by taking a nibble. Please, don't try this at home. Especially with modern soil. You have no idea what's in it. Historians still argue whether the reduced sunlight during certain periods, like the Little Ice Age, had a significant impact on societal structures. Some believe it contributed to famines and social unrest, while others argue that technological innovations and adaptive strategies helped mitigate the worst effects. It's a reminder that even seemingly small changes in climate can have far-reaching consequences. Moving on from the fields, you head towards the barn. The animals are your responsibility, and they're certainly not shy about reminding you of that fact. The cows moo insistently, their breath steaming in the cold air. They're hungry, and they know you're the one who can do something about it. Inside the barn, it's dimly lit and smells of hay and manure, a scent that's both familiar and vaguely unpleasant. You start by mucking out the stalls, a task that's as unglamorous as it is essential. The animals shift and shuffle, their eyes following your every move. You toss fresh hay into their mangers, and they eagerly begin to munch, the rhythmic sound filling the space. You check on the chickens next, making sure they have enough feed and water. They cluck and peck, a flurry of feathers and nervous energy. Collecting eggs is a daily ritual, and you carefully gather the precious ovals, knowing that they'll be a valuable source of nourishment in the coming months. It's always a bit of a gamble though. Sometimes you find a dozen, sometimes only a handful. You swear the hens are deliberately withholding eggs just to mess with you. Once the animals are cared for, you turn your attention to other tasks. You need to mend some fences that have been damaged by the weather, and you also want to check on the store of firewood, making sure you have enough to last through the winter. The days are short, and every moment counts. Mainstream historical fact: animal husbandry was crucial in medieval life. Livestock provided not only food and materials but also essential labor for plowing fields and transporting goods. They were, in essence, the tractors and SUVs of their time. Quirky tidbit: some medieval farmers believed that burying a live toad under a barn's threshold would protect the livestock from disease and misfortune. I'm not sure how the toad felt about that arrangement, but I bet it wasn't thrilled. Talk about an amphibian home invasion. Historians still argue whether the Black Death had a lasting impact on animal husbandry practices. Some scholars claim it led to a shift towards more specialized farming, while others argue that traditional methods remained largely unchanged. It's a reminder that even catastrophic events can have complex and debated consequences. Later, you head back to the village. The light is fading even faster now, casting long shadows that dance and flicker in the twilight. You see other villagers going about their tasks, each one bundled up in layers of clothing, their faces etched with the same mixture of determination and weariness. You stop by the blacksmith's forge, the warm glow emanating from within a welcome sight. The blacksmith is hammering away at a piece of metal, the rhythmic clang filling the air. He's a skilled craftsman, and his work is essential to the community. He can repair tools, fashion new implements, and even create decorative items when time allows. You watch him for a few moments, mesmerized by the way he shapes the metal with fire and hammer. It's a skill that takes years to master, and you admire his dedication. He looks up and nods, a silent acknowledgement of your presence. You return the nod and continue on your way. You see the potter too, carefully shaping clay on his wheel. The potter's house also radiates warmth, as the kiln needs to be hot enough to bake the pottery. A good potter is highly valued, as pottery is a vital supply in any medieval community. You can't really eat soup out of a wooden bowl, can you? Mainstream historical fact: craft guilds played a significant role in medieval towns, regulating production standards and ensuring the quality of goods. These guilds were essentially the unions of their day, protecting the interests of their members. Quirky tidbit: medieval alchemists believed that base metals could be transformed into gold through a mystical process called transmutation. It turns out that turning lead into gold is slightly harder than it sounds, but they sure gave it a good try. Historians still argue whether the rise of craft specialization contributed to social stratification. Some argue that it created new opportunities for upward mobility, while others believe it reinforced existing inequalities. Another example of how changes can be seen in differing lights. Back home, the evening is settling in, and it's time for supper. A simple meal of stew and bread, but it's enough to fill your stomach and warm you from the inside out. You eat in silence, listening to the crackling fire in the hearth. After supper, you sit by the fire, mending clothes and telling stories to the children. It's one of the few times of day when you can forget about the hardships of life and simply enjoy each other's company. Even in the dim light, you can see the love and warmth in their eyes. You are so tired that you begin to drift off. You are almost asleep when you remember one last task and sigh. You trudge back to the barn for one last check on the animals before sleep claims you. Alright, let's snuggle deeper into this imaginary blanket of knowledge, shall we? The fire's crackling softly, the chamomile tea is steeping, and the snow outside is, well, it's doing whatever snow does. Namely, being cold and probably making someone miserable. That someone might even be you. Winter. The season of shimmering landscapes and roaring fireplaces, and also of sniffles, coughs, and a general feeling of wanting to hibernate until, say, July. You trudge through the slush, head down, shoulders hunched, feeling the icy wind bite at your exposed skin. Each breath is a tiny cloud, a visible manifestation of your slowly freezing soul. Charming, isn't it? So, what exactly are these seasonal shenanigans trying to pull? Let's dive into the common winter ailments, shall we? First, the head honcho of winter woes, the common cold. Ah, yes, the cold. Not to be confused with hypothermia, which is, actually life-threatening, but annoying nonetheless. Your nose transforms into a leaky faucet, your throat feels like you swallowed a cactus, and your head throbs with the rhythmic intensity of a Viking drum circle. Fun times. The common cold, caused by a plethora of viruses, rhinoviruses being the usual suspects, spreads like gossip at a particularly juicy PTA meeting. You touch a contaminated doorknob, then rub your eye, and bam! Welcome to Cold Town, population, U. Symptoms usually peak within a few days and then gradually fade, leaving you feeling like you've just completed a marathon, in slow motion, while carrying a bowling ball. What can you do? Rest, my friend, rest. Your body is waging a microscopic war, and it needs reinforcements. Think of sleep as sending in the cavalry, tired, possibly slightly smelly, but ultimately effective. Hydrate like a desert traveler stumbling upon an oasis. Water, tea, especially with honey and lemon, Grandma knew what she was talking about, clear broth. Avoid sugary drinks, they just feed the invaders. And for symptom relief, over-the-counter decongestants and pain relievers can offer temporary respite. Just be sure to follow the dosage instructions. We don't want to accidentally invent a new flavor of popsicle now, do we? A historical tidbit for you: it wasn't until the 1950s that scientists definitively linked viruses to the common cold. Before that, it was all theories and speculation, often involving things like bad air. Seriously, people thought miasmas, foul-smelling air, caused disease. Which, in some cases, it could, but not the cold. Imagine trying to sell air freshener as a cure for the flu. The boardroom meetings must have been fragrant. Now, let's tackle its crankier, more aggressive cousin, the flu. Influenza. The bane of workplaces and schoolhouses everywhere. The flu isn't just a bad cold, it's the cold's evil twin who lifts weights and has a vendetta against your immune system. You'll experience the same nasal congestion and sore throat, but with added bonuses like fever, chills, body aches, and exhaustion so profound you'll question your entire existence. Seriously, you will contemplate the meaning of it all between shivers. Unlike the cold, the flu is caused by influenza viruses, A, B, and sometimes C, which are constantly mutating. This is why you need a new flu shot every year. It's like trying to catch a greased pig at a county fair. You might get it, but next year, that pig will have learned new escape tactics. Historians still argue whether the Great Flu Pandemic of 1918, which killed an estimated 50 million people worldwide, was caused by a bird flu virus that jumped to humans. Some researchers believe it originated in Kansas, while others point to China. Regardless of its origin, that pandemic was a stark reminder of the flu's potential devastation. So, what to do when the flu comes knocking? See a doctor. Seriously. Antiviral medications can shorten the duration and severity of the illness, but they work best when taken early. Again, rest is your best friend. Think of yourself as a rechargeable battery. The flu drains you completely, so you need to plug yourself in and let the electrons flow. Lots and lots of fluids. And maybe binge-watch some comfort shows. You deserve it. You're battling a microscopic beast, after all. Fringe tidbit: did you know that some people swear by elderberry syrup as a natural remedy for the flu? Studies have shown it may have antiviral properties, but the evidence is still, well, shall we say, not entirely conclusive. Think of it as the herbal equivalent of crossing your fingers. Might help, might not, but it can't hurt, unless you're allergic to elderberries, in which case, definitely avoid it. Moving on, let's talk about the skin. Ah, the skin, that often overlooked organ that keeps all your insides, inside. In winter, the skin suffers. The cold air, low humidity, and indoor heating combine to create a perfect storm of dryness and irritation. You'll find yourself itching, flaking, and generally feeling like a lizard in desperate need of a good moisturizing session. Dry skin can lead to other problems, like eczema flare-ups. Eczema, also known as atopic dermatitis, is a chronic inflammatory skin condition that causes itchy, red, and inflamed skin. Winter can exacerbate eczema symptoms, leading to intense itching and discomfort. The urge to scratch can be almost overwhelming, but scratching only makes it worse, creating a vicious cycle of itch-scratch inflammation. What can you do to combat winter skin woes? Moisturize, moisturize, moisturize. Think of moisturizer as a shield against the elements. Apply it liberally after showering or bathing, while your skin is still damp. Choose thick, emollient-rich creams or ointments. Avoid hot showers, which can strip your skin of its natural oils. And consider using a humidifier to add moisture to the air. Your skin, and your sinuses, will thank you. Fun fact, Cleopatra, the iconic queen of Egypt, was known for her elaborate beauty rituals, which included bathing in milk and honey. Milk contains lactic acid, a gentle exfoliant, while honey is a natural humectant, drawing moisture to the skin. So, if you happen to have a few gallons of milk and a jar of honey lying around, feel free to channel your inner Cleopatra. Just maybe skip the ASP. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, seasonal affective disorder, SAD. Yes, winter can affect your mood. The lack of sunlight can disrupt your body's natural sleep-wake cycle and lead to a decrease in serotonin, a neurotransmitter associated with feelings of happiness and well-being. You might feel sluggish, irritable, and generally blah. SAD is more than just the winter blues. It's a real medical condition that can significantly impact your quality of life. Symptoms include persistent sadness, loss of interest in activities you once enjoyed, changes in appetite or sleep, and difficulty concentrating. If you suspect you have SAD, talk to your doctor. Treatment options include light therapy, which involves sitting in front of a special light box that mimics sunlight. Antidepressant medications and talk therapy can also be helpful. And don't underestimate the power of social connection. Spend time with loved ones, engage in enjoyable activities, and try to get some exercise. Even a short walk outdoors can boost your mood. Fringe tidbit time: some people believe that consuming vitamin D supplements can help alleviate SAD symptoms. Vitamin D is often called the sunshine vitamin because your body produces it when exposed to sunlight. However, the scientific evidence supporting vitamin D supplementation for SAD is still mixed. Talk to your doctor before taking any supplements. And lastly, a quick word about frostbite and hypothermia. These are serious conditions that require immediate medical attention. Frostbite occurs when your skin and underlying tissues freeze. Hypothermia occurs when your body loses heat faster than it can produce it, leading to a dangerously low body temperature. Prevention is key. Dress in layers, cover exposed skin, and stay dry. If you're going to be spending time outdoors in cold weather, avoid alcohol and caffeine, which can impair your body's ability to regulate temperature. And if you suspect someone is experiencing frostbite or hypothermia, seek medical help immediately. Don't try to warm them up too quickly, as this can cause further damage. Historians still argue about the exact number of casualties during Napoleon's disastrous invasion of Russia in 1812, but it's estimated that hundreds of thousands of soldiers perished from cold, starvation, and disease. The brutal Russian winter played a significant role in Napoleon's defeat, demonstrating the devastating power of the elements. So, remember, respect winter. So, there you have it. A quick rundown of common winter ailments and remedies. Remember to take care of yourself, stay warm, and hydrate. And if all else fails, just embrace the hibernation. We'll see you in spring. No, wait, before you snuggle into your real blankets, just one more joke. What do you call a snowman temper tantrum? A meltdown. Two snowmen were standing in a garden. One said to the other, "Funny, I can smell carrots." One last one for the road. Why did the snowman call a timeout? He needed a cool down. Good night, sleep tight, and don't let the frostbite bite. Alright, settle in, make yourself comfy. Maybe grab a mug of something warm. Winter's whisper is definitely in the air, isn't it? That bite that nips at your nose and makes you want to burrow under approximately 7 blankets. It's a time of year steeped in, well, everything. History, beauty, and a whole lot of strange beliefs. So, let's wander through the frosted landscape of winter superstitions and folklore, shall we? Just, try not to doze off completely. You pull your scarf a little tighter as you step outside. The air is crisp, laced with the scent of wood smoke, a classic winter aroma. Notice how the world seems quieter, muffled by the snow. It's a perfect setting for stories, and believe me, winter has plenty. You trudge through the freshly fallen snow, each step crunching softly. It's picturesque, like something out of a Christmas card, until you realize you're 10 minutes from your car and your boots aren't as waterproof as you thought. But hey, even minor discomforts are part of the winter experience, right? People have been dealing with far worse for centuries. One of the earliest, and arguably most influential, winter traditions revolves around the winter solstice. You probably know it as the shortest day of the year. But for ancient civilizations, it was a lot more than just a calendar date. The Romans, for example, celebrated Saturnalia, a festival dedicated to the god Saturn. It was a time of feasting, gift-giving, early Christmas presents, and general merrymaking. And, maybe more importantly, overturning the traditional social order, like an ancient Halloween. For a brief period, slaves and masters could switch places. I bet that was a fun conversation. But beneath the festive cheer, there was a palpable sense of unease. The sun was at its weakest, and the days were getting shorter, raising fears that it might disappear altogether. This is where the superstitions really begin to creep in. You can almost hear the whispers of the past on the wind. Speaking of whispers, you might be surprised to learn about some of the more, shall we say, unique beliefs surrounding the winter solstice. In some cultures, it was thought to be a time when the veil between worlds thinned, allowing spirits, both good and bad, to cross over. To ward off malevolent entities, people would perform elaborate rituals, like banging pots and pans to make noise or leaving out offerings of food. You almost wish you had brought your saucepan with you, just in case. Historians still argue whether these practices stemmed purely from fear, or if there was also a deeper, more spiritual connection to the cycles of nature. Either way, it's clear that winter was a time of heightened awareness and a deep respect for the forces that governed their world. It was also a time of community and togetherness. After all, when the weather outside is frightful, you need all the support you can get from your neighbors, right? You pull your gloves tighter, feeling the cold start to seep in. The air smells even sharper now, with a hint of pine. It makes you think of Christmas trees, which, as you know, are another major symbol of winter celebrations. But did you know that the tradition of bringing evergreen trees indoors predates Christianity? Ancient cultures, like the Egyptians and Romans, used evergreen branches to decorate their homes during the winter solstice, symbolizing life and hope in the midst of the darkness. The idea was to bring a little bit of the outside world in, as a promise that spring would eventually return. So, next time you're struggling to wrestle that Christmas tree into its stand, and inevitably getting poked in the eye by a rogue needle, remember that you're participating in a tradition that's thousands of years old. A tradition of pain and needles, that is. Now, let's delve into some of the quirkier winter superstitions associated with weather. You know, the kind of stuff your grandma probably swore by. You're not entirely sure if she was serious or just messing with you. For example, some people believe that the thickness of an animal's fur coat could predict the severity of the winter. The thicker the fur, the harsher the winter to come. Of course, this theory often conveniently aligned with whatever the current weather was doing. Oh, look at that squirrel. Must be another mild winter. And then there are the beliefs surrounding snow itself. In some areas, it was considered good luck to catch snowflakes on your tongue. I mean, that's kind of fun, right? Unless, of course, you live in a city with questionable air quality. Maybe stick to admiring the snowflakes from a distance in that case. Other superstitions tied the first snowfall of the year to future events. For instance, some believed that if the first snowfall occurred on a Sunday, it would be a year of abundant harvests. I wonder how accurate that turned out to be. Historians still argue whether these seemingly random weather-related beliefs were based on astute observations of nature, or simply wishful thinking in the face of unpredictable conditions. Probably a bit of both, to be honest. It's always reassuring to think you have some control over the chaos of the natural world, even if it's just by believing that a furry squirrel holds the key to your winter survival. You quicken your pace, feeling the chill intensify. The sun is starting to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and purple. It's beautiful, but it also means it's time to head indoors before you accidentally turn into a human icicle. Now, let's chat about some winter creatures, both real and imagined. After all, what's winter without a good monster story? We have to have Krampus. Obviously, many animals hibernate during the winter to conserve energy. Bears are the poster children for this behavior. But what you might not know is that bears don't actually truly hibernate. They enter a state of torpor, where their heart rate and body temperature drop, but they can still wake up relatively easily. So, if you happen to stumble across a hibernating bear in the woods, please don't poke it. But then there are the mythical creatures that are said to roam the winter landscapes. The most famous is probably the Yeti. While many believe that the Yeti is nothing more than a legend, there are those who are convinced that it's a real, undiscovered primate. Maybe, one day, we'll finally get definitive proof of its existence. Or maybe it's just a particularly large, hairy tourist. Historians still argue whether the Yeti legend is based on glimpses of real animals, like bears or snow leopards, or if it's purely a product of human imagination. Whatever the truth, the Yeti has become a powerful symbol of the mysteries and dangers of the winter wilderness. And honestly, a good cautionary tale to keep you from wandering too far from the trail. You arrive back at your car, relieved to escape the cold. As you drive away, you glance back at the snow-covered landscape. It looks peaceful, serene, almost magical. But you know that beneath the beauty, there's a layer of folklore and superstition, a reminder of the power that winter holds over our imaginations. And of course, of our tendency to invent weird and wonderful stories to explain the things we don't understand. Now that I think about it, that is pretty much all holidays. Okay, settle in, grab a comfy blanket, maybe a cup of chamomile tea, hold the honey, we're saving that for a really special occasion, like, surviving another week. You're trudging through the mud, rain plastering your tunic to your skin. You can feel the chill seeping into your bones despite the heavy wool. Every step is a battle against the clinging earth, and the only sound is the squelch of your boots and the distant, ominous rumble of thunder. Fun times, right? But hey, even in the bleakest of medieval winters, or the most sweltering Roman summers, people found ways to party. They had to. Morale is a funny thing. It's like trying to keep a fire going with wet wood. You gotta keep tending to it, adding fuel, shielding it from the wind, or it just sputters out and leaves you in the cold. And in a world constantly teetering on the edge of famine, disease, and war, that fire of morale needed constant stoking. Think about it. You're a peasant, right? Your life consists of backbreaking labor from sunup to sundown, barely scratching out enough to feed your family. The lord of the manor takes a hefty chunk of your produce, the taxes are crippling, and the Black Death is just a cough away. What gets you through? What makes you get up and do it all again the next day? Hope, sure, but also, a good party. And these weren't just any parties, they were all out, no holds barred, celebrate like you might die tomorrow extravaganzas. Because, let's be honest, you probably would die tomorrow. So, you might as well go out with a bang, or at least a decent jig and a flagon of ale. Let's rewind a bit. We're talking about celebrations across history, and one thing that stands out is how deeply ingrained they were in the agricultural cycle. Think about harvest festivals. You spend months toiling in the fields, praying for sun and rain in the right amounts, battling pests, and then, finally, the crops come in. It's a time for immense relief. A tangible sign that you won't starve for another year. And that, my friend, is definitely worth celebrating. You can almost smell the freshly baked bread and hear the music echoing through the village square. The Romans were masters of this, too. They had festivals for pretty much everything. Saturnalia, for example. Named for the god Saturn, it was a midwinter festival that involved gift-giving, feasting, role reversal, slaves could boss around their masters, talk about a power trip, and general mayhem. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine expression of social equality or just a carefully managed release valve to prevent unrest. But either way, it sounds like a good time. Imagine, after working under the harsh Roman sun, a time to kick back, forget your place, and maybe even get away with a little mischief. I mean, who wouldn't want to be waited on hand and foot for a day? Just picture it, you lounging in a toga while someone else fans you with a palm frond and feeds you grapes. Now that's what I call celebrating. And speaking of Romans, did you know they even celebrated Parentalia, a festival dedicated to honoring deceased ancestors? It wasn't exactly a party, more like a solemn remembrance, but it's a reminder that even grief needed its ritual. You'd bring offerings to the tombs of your family members, leave flowers, and share a meal with them, symbolically, of course, unless you're into that kind of thing. It's a stark contrast to the revelry of Saturnalia, but it highlights the importance of community and remembering your roots. Even in times of hardship, remembering those who came before you could provide a sense of connection and purpose. Now, zooming forward a few centuries, let's talk about medieval banquets. Oh boy, those were something. Imagine tables groaning under the weight of roasted meats, pies piled high with every imaginable filling, and enough ale and wine to float a small ship. You'd have minstrels playing lively tunes, jugglers tossing brightly colored balls, and maybe even a fool cracking jokes, some of which were probably pretty awful, but hey, it's the thought that counts, right? One of the more peculiar traditions of medieval feasting involved the boar's head. Seriously, a giant boar's head, often adorned with garlands and sometimes even set alight, would be paraded into the hall with great fanfare. It was a symbol of bravery and abundance, and eating it was supposed to bring good luck. I mean, I guess if you're into that sort of thing. Personally, I'd rather just have a slice of ham, but to each their own, right? And these banquets weren't just about stuffing your face. They were carefully orchestrated displays of power and wealth. The lord of the manor would be seated at the head table, surrounded by his most important guests. The food served, the entertainment provided, even the way the table was set, it all sent a message about his status and influence. It was a form of social theater, where everyone played their part. You might be a lowly peasant watching from the back of the hall, but even witnessing such extravagance could inspire a sense of loyalty and awe. Or maybe just envy. Depends on your personality, really. But it wasn't all lords and ladies feasting on swan. Common folk had their own celebrations, often centered around religious holidays. Christmas, Easter, May Day, these were all times for communities to come together, forget their troubles, and have a good time. May Day, in particular, was a celebration of spring and fertility, often involving dancing around a maypole, crowning a May Queen, and, well, let's just say things could get a little frisky. Historians still argue whether these festivities were primarily religious in nature or more rooted in pagan traditions. It's probably a mix of both, to be honest. Christianity often co-opted existing pagan rituals and holidays, giving them a new meaning while still retaining some of their original flavor. It was a way to ease the transition to a new religion and make it more palatable to the masses. Think of it as cultural appropriation, but with a slightly more benevolent intent. But whether it was a grand medieval banquet or a simple village feast, the purpose was the same: to provide a temporary escape from the harsh realities of life, to strengthen community bonds, and to remind everyone that even in the darkest of times, there was still reason to celebrate. A little bit of revelry can go a long way towards lifting spirits and making people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. You know, it's kind of funny how little has changed in some ways. We still have our own versions of harvest festivals, Christmas celebrations, and even, well, maybe not boar's head parades, but we definitely still find ways to indulge in excessive amounts of food and drink during the holidays. It's human nature, I guess. We all need a little break from the grind every now and then. And that brings us back to you, still trudging through the mud. But now, maybe, just maybe, you have a slightly better understanding of why people throughout history have always found time to celebrate, even when life was tough. Because sometimes, all you need is a little bit of feasting and festivities to keep that fire of morale burning bright. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I hear the sound of someone opening a bottle of wine. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's talk about the joy, and I use that word very loosely, of getting around when winter decides to turn the world into a giant ice rink. You trudge forward, your boots sinking just a little into the fresh powder. It looks pristine, like something out of a holiday card. But that quickly fades when you realize this is your holiday card, and you're the main character stuck in an endless loop of slipping and sliding. The air bites at your exposed skin, that tingly, almost painful cold that reminds you that, yes, you are indeed alive, and probably regretting your life choices. Each breath steams in front of you, a temporary white cloud in the vast, gray canvas. Your nose is probably running. Don't worry, mine is too. It's a glamorous life we lead. And don't even get me started on the roads. What were once smooth, predictable surfaces are now treacherous expanses of ice and packed snow. Driving becomes a delicate dance, a constant negotiation between forward momentum and the very real threat of ending up in a ditch. You tap the brakes, gently, so gently, feeling the car twitch beneath you. Oh, the sweet sound of ABS. You're pretty sure you just aged 5 years in that one little maneuver. You remember, vaguely, a time before winter tires. A time of carefree summer drives with the windows down and the music blasting. Now, the music is still blasting, but it's just to drown out the internal screaming of your anxiety. Every pothole is a potential disaster, every turn a gamble. You grip the steering wheel a little tighter, knuckles white. Is this what adventure feels like? Because you're pretty sure you'd rather be home, under a blanket, with a mug of something hot. But travel in winter wasn't always a white-knuckle affair behind the wheel of a Subaru. Think back further. Way back. To the Roman Empire. They were pretty good at building roads, weren't they? I mean, all roads lead to Rome, and all that jazz. A little-known fact, Roman road builders actually incorporated heated pavements into some of their major roads. Not everywhere, of course, that would have been ridiculously expensive. But in certain strategic locations, like mountain passes or areas prone to heavy snowfall, they used a system of underground heating to keep the roads clear. Pretty ingenious, right? Basically, it was a giant, ancient underfloor heating system, powered by wood-burning furnaces. Imagine that as a winter commute solution. Of course, even the Romans couldn't completely conquer winter. When the snow and ice really piled up, they relied on good old-fashioned manpower. Slaves and soldiers would be tasked with clearing the roads, using shovels, picks, and even fire to melt the ice. I guess even then, somebody had to be stuck with the unenviable task of shoveling. And speaking of unenviable tasks, ever heard of the snow fleas of medieval Europe? Not actual fleas, thankfully. They were gangs of beggars who would swarm affluent travelers during heavy snowstorms, offering to clear the path ahead in exchange for a few coins. Basically, a medieval, opportunistic snow removal service. Some accounts paint them as helpful and hardworking, while others suggest they were little more than organized extortionists, deliberately making paths worse so they could then help clear them. Historians still argue whether these snow fleas were a genuine reflection of societal desperation or simply a clever scam. Fast forward a few centuries, and you'll find the development of sledges and skis. For centuries, skis were a simple, yet effective means of traveling across snowy terrain, especially in regions like Scandinavia. Initially, they were basic wooden planks strapped to the feet, but over time, designs evolved to improve grip and maneuverability. Some of the earliest skis were actually made from animal bones. Imagine rocking that at the ski resort. Yeah, these are vintage, very vintage. Then there are sledges, which have been used for transportation for millennia. From hauling goods to simply getting from point A to point B, sledges were a crucial mode of transport in colder climates. Some cultures even used sledges pulled by animals like dogs or reindeer, a practice that continues in some parts of the world today. You might even say that dog sledding is a distant relative of the modern snowmobile. Which, let's be honest, sounds a lot more fun than driving to work in a minivan. But even with all these advancements, travel in winter remained a challenge. Stagecoaches, for example, often struggled to navigate snowy roads. Passengers would sometimes have to get out and walk alongside the coach, pushing it through drifts or helping to free it from icy ruts. And let's not forget the horses, poor things, struggling to maintain their footing on the slick surfaces. A long journey in winter could be an endurance test for both humans and animals. Speaking of endurance tests, did you know about the Great Blizzard of 1888? It was one of the most severe blizzards in recorded history, hitting the northeastern United States with unprecedented force. Snowdrifts reached incredible heights, burying towns and isolating communities. Transportation ground to a halt, and people were trapped in their homes for days. It was a stark reminder of the raw power of nature and the vulnerability of human infrastructure. It was also, coincidentally, the year that the pneumatic tire was invented, which is weirdly apropos when you are stuck in the snow and your tires are spinning. Then, there's the quirky side of winter travel history. Ever heard of ice roads? These temporary roads are built on frozen lakes and rivers, providing access to remote communities and resource-rich areas that are otherwise inaccessible during the winter months. They're typically used in northern regions of Canada and Russia, where the ice freezes thick enough to support heavy vehicles. It's a daring, and somewhat insane, feat of engineering. I mean, you're driving on a lake. One wrong calculation, and you're taking an unplanned dip in freezing water. But hey, at least the scenery is nice. Another weird aspect. Reindeer mail. Yes, reindeer mail. In the early 20th century, reindeer were used to deliver mail across the frozen landscapes of Alaska. Imagine getting your Christmas cards delivered by Rudolph and his buddies. Talk about a festive delivery service. It's a lot cooler than the postal worker complaining about walking up your driveway. So, as you navigate the winter wonderland outside your window, remember the struggles of those who came before you. They faced the same challenges, the same frustrations, the same icy roads. They may not have had heated seats or all-wheel drive, but they found ways to adapt, to overcome, and to keep moving forward. You are basically an Ice Age pioneer. And if all else fails, just remember, it's only temporary. Spring will eventually arrive, the snow will melt, and the roads will be clear. Until then, just keep your tires pointed in the right direction, and maybe, just maybe, you'll make it to your destination in one piece. And when you finally get there, treat yourself to something warm. You deserve it. I suggest hot chocolate. Maybe even with a little, something, extra. Just don't tell anyone I said that. Oh, and one last thought, before you venture back into the frozen wilds. Remember to check your tire pressure. Seriously. Low tire pressure in cold weather can significantly reduce your traction and increase your risk of skidding. It's a small thing, but it can make a big difference. And hey, it's one less thing to worry about as you navigate the winter landscape. And also, don't forget to brush off the top of your car. You may be able to see through the front windshield, but leaving the rest covered in snow is like driving around with an unstable blanket. And that can make driving dangerous for those around you. So do future you, and present me, a solid and brush your car off. It is like 5 minutes of work and prevents a possible accident. Oh, and if you're in the middle of nowhere, and your phone dies, you could always try building a snow cairn and hope that someone sees it. You know, in case the battery pack dies. Because of course it would. Because why would the battery pack not die when you needed it the most? Right? That's just how life works. You're basically screwed anyway, though. Historians still argue whether snow cairns are an effective means of signaling for help or are just fancy snow sculptures. Okay. Maybe now I can wish you good night. Maybe. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's pull up a comfy chair, maybe grab that snuggie your aunt knitted, the one that smells vaguely of mothballs and regret, and let's talk about how people actually survived winters in the olden days. I mean, beyond just blaming the weather on the patriarchy or something. Seriously, how did they do it? We've explored the ingenuity, the architecture, the clothes, but there's another crucial element, the church. And no, I'm not talking about turning the other cheek when your neighbor steals your firewood. More like actually providing the firewood. Think about it, you're trudging through knee-deep snow, your breath clouding in front of your face like some budget-friendly special effect. Your fingers are so numb you can't feel the reins of your donkey-drawn sled, and your stomach is rumbling louder than a heavy metal concert in Valhalla. Hope is starting to feel like a distant memory, a sunbeam stubbornly refusing to break through the perpetually gray clouds. You're just one bad blizzard away from becoming a human popsicle. Not ideal. Now, imagine a flickering light in the distance. A warm glow spilling out from the stained glass windows of the local church. Suddenly, that snuggie-level comfort seems within reach. You're spurred on, not by the promise of a heavenly reward, though, hey, maybe that too, but by the far more immediate prospect of a hot meal and a place to thaw out your frozen extremities. That's the church in winter. A lifeline, a beacon, well, you get the picture. The medieval church, as you probably know, wasn't just about sermons and stained glass. It was a central hub of community life. Think of it as the ancient world's version of a community center, a soup kitchen, and a social security office all rolled into one. And during winter, that role became even more critical. We're talking about organized charity on a scale that's honestly pretty impressive when you consider they didn't have GoFundMe or Venmo. One of the church's main functions was almsgiving. Giving to the poor was considered a sacred duty, and winter was prime time for it. Churches would distribute food, clothing, and fuel to those in need. Think of it as an early form of welfare, only instead of filling out endless forms in a drafty government building, you'd just, show up and pray a little. Hopefully, you were good at the praying part. Historians still argue whether the level of aid provided was sufficient to meet the needs of the populace. Spoiler alert, probably not entirely, but there's no denying that it made a tangible difference. I mean, it was definitely better than just hoping the winter would end soon. And it wasn't just the local parish priest dipping into the collection plate. Monasteries, with their often vast land holdings and resources, played a significant role. Picture this, monks, bundled in their thick woolen robes, painstakingly doling out bowls of hearty stew from the monastery kitchen. These weren't just Instagram-worthy aesthetic monks, mind you, they were literally keeping people alive. Imagine the pressure to ladle correctly. They also offered shelter, opening their doors to the homeless and travelers caught in the worst of the weather. In some cases, monasteries even had dedicated hospices, not the end-of-life care facilities we think of today, but rather places of refuge for the weary and vulnerable. So, if you were a traveling merchant caught in a blizzard, or a peasant family displaced by flooding, a monastery might be your only hope. But it wasn't just about handouts. The church also provided spiritual sustenance. Winter, with its long nights and bleak landscapes, could be a time of profound hardship and despair. The church offered solace, hope, and a sense of community when people needed it most. Regular services, special winter festivals, and the comforting rituals of faith helped people cope with the emotional toll of the season. Think of it as ancient therapy, with a lot more incense and Latin chanting. Speaking of Latin, here's a joke I made up: what does a Roman ghost like to wear? A tugia. I'll be here all night, literally, writing. Now, here's a quirkier tidbit. Ever heard of soul cakes? In some parts of Europe, on All Souls' Day, November 2nd, the poor would go door to door offering prayers for the dead in exchange for these small, round cakes. It was a way for the needy to earn a little extra food during the lean winter months and for the wealthy to, allegedly, buy their way into heaven. Basically, Halloween with slightly more theological undertones. And let's not forget the church's role in preserving knowledge. Monks meticulously copied and preserved ancient texts, ensuring that learning and culture survived through the Dark Ages. These illuminated manuscripts weren't just pretty pictures, they were repositories of information about everything from agriculture to medicine, knowledge that could be vital for surviving a harsh winter. You know, things like, How to Tell the Difference Between Edible Berries and Poisonous Ones, Volume 3. However, let's not paint too rosy a picture. The church wasn't always a flawless paragon of charity. Abuses of power, corruption, and outright hypocrisy were not unheard of. Some clergymen were more interested in accumulating wealth and power than in serving the poor. And let's be honest, the church's doctrines on poverty, you know, the whole "blessed are the poor" thing, could sometimes be used to justify social inequality rather than alleviate it. Furthermore, the church's aid wasn't always distributed equitably. The wealthy and powerful often received preferential treatment, while the most vulnerable could still be left out in the cold. And while the church offered spiritual comfort, it often reinforced the existing social hierarchy. You were still expected to know your place and be grateful for whatever meager assistance you received. It's a complex picture, isn't it? On the one hand, the church was a vital source of support for the poor and vulnerable during the harsh winter months. On the other hand, it was also an institution with its own flaws and limitations. Ultimately, it reflects the inherent contradictions of medieval society itself, a world of deep faith and profound inequality, of genuine compassion and blatant self-interest. And, of course, there's the whole question of whether religious belief actually motivated charitable acts. Did people give because they genuinely cared about the poor, or because they feared divine punishment? Or maybe it was a bit of both. I mean, no one really wants to burn in hell for being stingy, right? It's just not a good look. That's probably why Dante Alighieri didn't write The Divine Comedy in Miami. Here's another joke for you. I saw a sign that said, "Watch for children." I thought, that sounds like a fair trade. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's all well and good, but what about the really weird stuff? What about the pagan holdovers, the strange rituals, the winter solstice celebrations disguised as Christian holidays? Well, buckle up, because that's where things get interesting. Remember the Yule log? That festive tradition of burning a giant log in the fireplace? Yeah, that's not exactly a Christian invention. It's a pagan custom that predates Christianity by centuries. It was originally a ritual to honor the winter solstice and to encourage the return of the sun. The church, being the savvy PR machine that it was, simply co-opted the tradition and gave it a Christian spin. Suddenly, the Yule log became a symbol of the light of Christ shining in the darkness. Problem solved. Now, that's marketing. And what about Christmas itself? Historians still argue whether Jesus was actually born on December 25th. The date was likely chosen to coincide with existing pagan festivals celebrating the winter solstice, making it easier to convert people to Christianity. Sneaky, but effective. So, while the church provided tangible aid and spiritual comfort during the winter months, it also played a role in shaping cultural traditions and beliefs. It was a complex and multifaceted institution that influenced every aspect of medieval life, from the mundane to the mystical. And whether you view it as a force for good or ill, there's no denying its profound impact on the way people survived, and celebrated, the winter season. Now, think of those medieval villagers, huddled around the warmth of the church on a cold winter night, sharing stories, singing hymns, and finding solace in their faith. They faced hardships we can barely imagine, but they found ways to endure. And that, my friend, is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Even with terrible plumbing. Wow, that was a long one. I could really use some hot cocoa. And maybe a prayer that spring arrives soon. But before I sign off, here's one last little gem of wisdom for you. Never underestimate the power of a good wool blanket and a well-stocked pantry. And, you know, maybe a little faith wouldn't hurt either. Just in case. Okay, settle in, grab your favorite blanket, and let's drift back, way back, to the Middle Ages. Imagine, if you will, that it's winter. And I mean winter. Not your, oh, it's a bit chilly, winter. We're talking about the kind of winter that made entire civilizations reconsider their life choices. You trudge through the snow, which is probably knee-deep and suspiciously yellow. The wind whips at your face, making your eyes water and your nose run. Charming, isn't it? You're bundled in layers of, well, whatever scraps of wool and fur you could find. Forget about breathable fabrics, it's all about survival, baby. Your breath fogs in the frigid air. Each step is a monumental effort. You're likely heading towards a village, hoping to find some semblance of warmth and maybe, just maybe, a crust of bread. You're probably thinking, ugh, this sucks. I wish I had my electric blanket and Netflix. But hey, at least you don't have to worry about dragons, probably. Back in the medieval period, winter wasn't just a season, it was a force of nature that dictated pretty much everything. The days are short. You can expect maybe 8 hours of daylight at best, which means most of your time is spent in the gloom. And don't even think about popping out for a quick latte after work, unless, of course, your work involves chopping wood or feeding livestock. One mainstream historical fact that's crucial to understand is that winter significantly impacted agriculture. Ground frozen solid. Crops can't grow. That means food shortages. And food shortages, my friend, lead to all sorts of unpleasantness. Think increased prices, inflation even back then, malnutrition, and potential famine. Not exactly ideal picnic weather, is it? Now, here's a slightly quirky tidbit for you. Did you know that in some medieval villages, people used to keep livestock inside their homes during the winter? Imagine sharing your living space with a cow. Talk about a roommate situation from hell. Although, on the plus side, at least you'd have a built-in heater, and a ready supply of, well, you know. Historians still argue whether the Little Ice Age, a period of significant cooling that lasted from roughly the 14th to the 19th centuries, was a consistent global phenomenon or more localized to certain regions. What's not debated is that wherever you were, colder temperatures and longer winters led to widespread social and economic disruption. You stumble into your hovel, which is basically a one-room shack made of mud and straw. It's dark, smoky, and smells vaguely of manure. The fire you manage to coax into existence provides minimal warmth. Congratulations, you're living the dream. The main source of heat is a central hearth, which is basically a glorified bonfire in the middle of your house. Smoke billows everywhere, stinging your eyes and making you cough. Carbon monoxide poisoning. Just another Tuesday. You huddle around the flames with your family, trying to absorb whatever meager warmth it offers. Speaking of family, they're all there, crammed together like sardines. The close quarters are, let's say, intimate. Privacy is a concept lost to the ages. Everyone knows everyone else's business, and personal space is something you read about in fantasy novels. Outside, the wind howls like a banshee. You can hear the wolves howling in the distance. Lovely lullaby, right? You try to ignore the gnawing hunger in your stomach and the constant, bone-chilling cold. Entertainment options are limited. There's no internet, no TV, no video games. Your evenings are spent telling stories, singing songs, or just staring into the fire, contemplating the meaninglessness of existence. You may also carve wood, weave cloth, or repair tools if you are among the industrious. One mainstream historical fact is that winter often brought a cessation of warfare. Armies couldn't march easily through snow-covered terrain, and battles were far less practical in freezing conditions. So, winter, in a weird way, sometimes provided a temporary respite from the constant conflicts. Here's a quirky tidbit: during the winter months, medieval peasants often engaged in a variety of folk customs and superstitions to ward off evil spirits and ensure a good harvest in the coming year. These rituals included everything from dancing around bonfires to making offerings to pagan gods. Yes, some pre-Christian beliefs lingered on for quite some time. Kind of like a medieval rave, but with more sacrificing of turnips. Historians still argue whether these pagan rituals represented genuine religious beliefs or were simply a way to cope with the harsh realities of winter and maintain a sense of community. Whatever the explanation, it's clear that winter was a time when the boundaries between the natural and supernatural seemed to blur. You finally managed to fall asleep, lulled by the crackling fire and the rhythmic snores of your family. You dream of warm sunshine, abundant food, and a life free from the tyranny of winter. But when you wake up, the reality is the same: cold, dark, and hungry. You need to venture out. Work continues, even in the depths of winter. People still need to eat, and wood still needs to be chopped. You bundle up again and head out into the frozen landscape. One mainstream historical fact is that medieval towns and cities were particularly vulnerable during winter. Food supplies often dwindled rapidly, and the poor faced starvation. Disease spread easily in the crowded, unsanitary conditions. And here's a quirky tidbit: winter sports were not entirely unknown. In some regions, people enjoyed ice skating, using bones strapped to their feet, sledding, and even early forms of ice hockey. Apparently, even medieval peasants needed a way to blow off steam. Or maybe they were just trying to stay warm. Historians still debate the extent to which climate change, even before the modern era, influenced medieval society. Variations in temperature and precipitation could have dramatic effects on agriculture, trade, and overall living conditions. Winter, in particular, was a crucial factor in shaping the medieval world. You're probably thinking, man, I'm glad I live in the 21st century. And you know what? You're right. We have it pretty good. Central heating, grocery stores, Netflix. It's a far cry from the harsh realities of medieval winter. But it's also worth remembering that the people of the Middle Ages were incredibly resilient. They faced unimaginable hardships with courage and determination. They found ways to survive and even thrive in the face of adversity. Their stories are a testament to the enduring human spirit. And, honestly, after a long day of shoveling snow, you're going to need a hug and a hot beverage. Just a little something to take the edge off, you know. Plus, think about all those cozy nights by the fire, telling stories, and bonding with your loved ones. Maybe, just maybe, there's something to be said for a little bit of medieval winter after all. ## wind down. As the fire crackles softly in your mind's eye, let the images of snow-covered landscapes and candlelit dwellings slowly fade. The wind no longer howls quite so fiercely, and the chill seeps away into the mists of time. Imagine the gentle snowfall, blanketing the fields and forests, creating a hush of peace. The air grows still, and the world slows down, drifting towards a quiet slumber. The hardships of medieval winter recede, replaced by the soft comfort of your own warm space. Feel the tension melt away from your shoulders, your breathing deepen, and your thoughts drift lazily. You are safe, you are warm, and you are surrounded by tranquility. Let the echoes of long-ago stories lull you into a peaceful sleep. The shadows lengthen, the light dims, and the world outside fades into darkness. Embrace the stillness, and allow yourself to be carried away on the gentle currents of sleep. Sweet dreams.